It's been a strong week for AMD, and Wednesday's action only added fuel to the momentum. The stock finished the session up 5.37% at $184.34, a huge move that caught the attention of both retail and institutional investors. And here's the important part. After the closing bell, AMD didn't give those gains back in any meaningful way. In fact, in the aftermarket, the stock was only down 20 cents, that's just 0.1%. In other words, the market wasn't looking for an excuse to sell. It was content to hold the line. That kind of resilience tells you something about sentiment right now. It tells you that the rally we've seen isn't just a flash in the pan driven by a single headline or speculative pop. There's something deeper at work, a combination of technical strength, macro tailwinds for the semiconductor sector, and anticipation for what could be one of AMD's most important events of the year, Analyst Day 2025 on November 11th in New York. This isn't just another date on the corporate calendar. Analyst Day is when a company lays out its vision, its product roadmap, and the details that can set the tone for investors over the next 12 to 24 months. And with everything AMD has been hinting at, expectations are building. We're talking about the MI450 architecture, which could be a serious leap forward in AI compute performance. We're talking about Helios rack-scale systems, which are aimed squarely at hyperscalers who need massive compute density. And we're talking about ROCm software, the open-source compute platform that AMD hopes will become the go-to environment for developers building AI workloads outside of the Nvidia CUDA ecosystem. Right now, the competitive narrative in AI hardware is still dominated by Nvidia, but the cracks in that dominance are showing. There's growing awareness that enterprises and governments want choice. They don't want to be locked into one vendor for mission-critical infrastructure. And that's where AMD can capitalize. The company already has performance per watt advantages in certain workloads, and if ROCm continues to mature, it could finally lower the barriers for customers who might otherwise feel tied to Nvidia's software stack. Another thing that's worth pointing out, AMD is benefiting from renewed optimism around export opportunities in China. For months, the question has been, will US export controls effectively lock AMD out of one of the biggest AI chip markets in the world? Recently, we've seen more clarity, and while the rules are still restrictive, there's enough flexibility for AMD to ship competitive AI products that comply with regulations. That's huge for revenue potential in 2025 and beyond. The market is clearly starting to price in not just short-term upside from these developments, but also the possibility that AMD is entering a multi-year growth phase in AI and high-performance computing. When you see a move like Wednesday's, over 5% in a single day, and it's followed by a flat aftermarket, it suggests buyers are thinking beyond the next trading session. They're looking ahead to product launches, customer wins, and market share gains that could take quarters or years to fully play out. From a technical perspective, this week's action is also encouraging. AMD's breakout above the $180 resistance level now turns that price area into potential support. That means if we see a little profit-taking later in the week, the stock could find buyers stepping in before it drops too far. On the upside, traders will be watching the $190 level as the next test, and a close above that could set up a run toward the all-time highs we saw earlier in the year. We can't ignore the macro backdrop, either. The broader semiconductor index has been firming up, and AI-related names have led much of that strength. Even with ongoing debates about whether the AI boom is overhyped, the companies actually delivering products and winning contracts are being rewarded in the market. AMD fits that bill right now. They're not just talking about AI, they're delivering silicon that major hyperscalers and enterprise customers are integrating into real workloads. If we zoom out, there's also the longer-term story. Over the last 5 years, AMD has transformed from a CPU challenger into a diversified player in gaming, data center, AI, and embedded systems. The acquisition of Xilinx continues to add high-margin revenue streams, and the company's financial discipline, keeping debt low and reinvesting in R&D, gives it flexibility to respond to both opportunities and challenges. This isn't the AMD of a decade ago that was fighting for survival. This is a company that has the scale, the balance sheet, and the technology to compete at the highest level. Now, heading into Thursday's trade, the big question is whether we see some continuation of Wednesday's momentum. Often after a strong move, you'll get a little consolidation, a day or two where the stock trades sideways as the market digests the move. But given how little AMD gave back in the aftermarket, there's a case to be made for follow-through buying, especially from funds that may have been waiting for a technical breakout to initiate or add to positions. Analyst commentary could also play a role. If we see price target upgrades or positive notes referencing Wednesday's action and the upcoming Analyst Day, that could help keep AMD in the headlines and on traders' watch lists. Remember, liquidity and attention matter. The more eyes on the stock, the more likely it is to see continued interest. It's also worth noting that Thursday's session will be the last full trading day before we start getting into the end-of-week positioning. That means some investors may want to lock in gains, while others may be willing to step in ahead of the weekend if they believe Analyst Day buzz will keep the stock supported. This push and pull can create some choppy intraday action, but for swing traders and long-term holders, the bigger picture remains the same. AMD is showing strength into a period where it has multiple potential catalysts lined up. For long-term investors, the strategy here is less about trying to time the next 1 or 2 day move, and more about recognizing that we may be in the early stages of a bigger re-rating of the stock. The AI narrative is still in its early innings, and if AMD can execute on its hardware roadmap while continuing to improve ROCm and deepen relationships with key customers, the valuation case gets stronger. In that context, a 5% move in 1 day isn't a reason to panic about volatility. It's a reminder that the market can reprice a stock quickly when confidence shifts. So, as we head into Thursday, the watchword is patience. For traders, that means respecting the momentum but not chasing blindly. For investors, it means keeping the focus on the multi-quarter story that Analyst Day could help illuminate. We'll be looking for any hints or leaks in the days ahead, but for now, the fact that AMD has held its ground after a big move is a bullish sign. The market seems ready to give this stock the benefit of the doubt, and in a sector where sentiment can turn on a dime, that's worth noting.